An AEW star seemingly confirms that CM Punk is no longer in the company, plus Andrade undergoes major surgery, requiring him to be on the shelf for several months. Speaking of CM Punk as well, being the Elite dropped yesterday, and the Elite have done it again, including the F CM Punk chants. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling, and we've got to talk about CM Punk once again. Even though the Elite are telling us, let it go, specifically Kenny Omega, let it go, we can't talk about it, they continue to talk about it. So we've got to continue to talk about it because there's constantly news being made. And let's start off talking about Punk's status with the company. No real developments when it comes to contract buyouts, non-compete clauses, etc. But certainly some interesting comments from a talent that reportedly CM Punk had handpicked to work with coming out of All Out. It appears an AEW star may have confirmed that CM Punk is no longer in the company following uncertainty about his status. During his appearance on Renee Paquette's podcast, The Session, Stokely Hathaway, the manager of AEW faction The Firm, said, quote, "Everything that was supposed to happen with The Firm did not happen. Back at All Out, what happened immediately after the pay-per-view, that was a huge part of it. The person we were supposed to directly feud with is no longer in the company. That was one thing I was looking forward to because I was hand-chosen for that role. I'm just going to say it. I don't know the specifics about people choosing sides. I just know that CM Punk said, hey, I want to work with this guy. That means a lot, regardless of what happened. Until now, the most recent word was that CM Punk was still officially under contract with AEW after talks for a buyout of his contract had stalled due to negotiations over a non-compete clause. This, of course, stems from the post-all-out media scrum in which Punk took aim at the likes of Colt Cabana, Hangman Adam Page, and AEW Executive Vice Presidents Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. Punk and the EVPs reportedly got into a fight in the locker room after Punk's verbal tirade, resulting in the suspensions of all involved. Ace Steel, who was on Punk's side of the ordeal, was released from the company, while the Bucks and Kenny Omega have since returned to AEW television. People close to Punk were reportedly not happy about the EVP's antics during their latest match, which took place in Punk's hometown of Chicago, Illinois last week on Dynamite. AEW president, owner, CEO Tony Khan has continually provided no comment on Punk's statement ever since the incident in question. Now, to expand a little bit more on this, Stokely Hathaway also spoke about how difficult it was to change and how difficult it was to pivot from what happened. As I mentioned, he had said, talking about CM Punk saying, hey, I want to work with this guy. He continued saying it holds a lot of weight and means a lot regardless of what happened, what will happen. When that didn't happen anymore, it was literally rewriting everything on the fly. Everyone in the group is trying to do their best, and we're trying to figure out how to make this work because the original purpose isn't the purpose anymore. So it's like, what do you do? Things are slowly gearing up. It's just going to take a few weeks with the way wrestling is nowadays. I get it. First impressions are everything, but it's a little difficult to change people's minds. Most people don't want to see Picasso work on his painting. They just want to see stuff done. That's the phrase we're in. We're working on it, but people don't want to see it worked on. They want to see the finished product. As I mentioned, Hathaway is the current manager of the firm. In the weeks leading up to All Out, the firm formed and consists of the likes of Austin and Colton Gunn, Ethan Page, Lee Moriarty, and W. Morrissey. As I mentioned, Punk's status with AEW is currently unclear. I wouldn't read too much into this. I know some people, because we're desperate for legitimate, tangible updates when it comes to Punk, that is still the side of things that is essentially radio silent, apart from when he does those MMA commentary shows and we get those tongue-in-cheek references of, you don't want me in the locker room on bad news and stay away from press conferences, etc. I don't suspect we are going to get much update from CM Punk when it comes to that. I think that some people might look at it and say, oh, he's no longer in the company, therefore he's been fired, he's been released, or they've come to a mutual termination. If he had, we would know. Let's face it, it would be widely reported. I think what Stokely Hathaway is referring to when he says that he's no longer in the company right now, like actively week to week on television, actively backstage, actively involved in the creative process, actively involved in the storylines. He's no longer in the company at the moment. But there are also a lot of people who are not currently in the company at the moment, but are still under contract and still getting paid by AEW and could still come back. I do really sympathize for Stokely Hathaway and the firm, it must be said, because as he kind of talks about, and this is something that I suppose has kind of been lost in everything that happened coming out of All Out, is that there was a plan in place. There were storylines that were written and put in motion, and there were plans that were going to happen between AEW All Out and Full Gear. You remember, MJF was coming back as a heel, and I know he's still a heel right now, but he was going to be a heel that was going to be managed by Stokely Hathaway, that was going to be supported by the firm, and you were going to have this back and forth between MJF and CM Punk, and Stokely Hathaway and this faction was going to be a part of that. So when CM Punk left, and when the CM Punk incident happened, MJF was in a difficult situation. Who was he going to feud with? He was going to feud with Jon Moxley. And then it became a point of, well, MJF is starting to get quite over as a babyface. And because he's feuded with Moxley, William Regal's getting involved and they're pivoting and going in a different direction, which I don't think for the initial couple of weeks they really realized they were going to go in. So the firm very quickly became redundant and they became this sort of weird part of the story that no one really knew what they were there for. So MJF decided to go a different way to Stokely Hathaway, and now you've got this faction that was there to be a heater for MJF, but now no longer he needs that faction. He's got a different manager. It's William Regal. And obviously me just saying it out loud, it's very convoluted, but that was because of the situation that happened at All Out. So now you've got Stokely Hathaway, who's been doing stuff really with Ethan Page in the majority of the recent weeks. They have to figure out what this faction is, and they have to figure out what is he going to do. And again, I feel bad for him because, I mean, he gave the business card to Jade Cargill. He's not her manager anymore. So you sympathize for him because clearly he was cast in a role that at the moment that role changed. But that's pro wrestling. It's about trying to figure out. It's about trying to understand and go in a different direction and find the direction that you're going to go in. So it is challenging, but as far as, is that Stokely Hathaway's confirmed that Punk's no longer an AEW star, or WWE, he's going back to WWE, or AEW have fired him or whatever? No, he's just currently not in the company at the moment. As far as we've heard, he's still under contract. As far as we've heard, he's still getting paid. We don't know if he's still suspended at this point, because even if Punk's not suspended, he still isn't going to be anywhere near AEW because he's out of action. In the midst of everything going on, we're All Out, he got injured, he got hurt in the main event against Jon Moxley. He tore his triceps and he's going to be out of action for 9 months. That was, of course, several months ago. At this point, he's probably still got 5-6 months remaining of a real intensive rehab on that injury, maybe a little bit less depending on how severe it was. So there's still so much we don't know, and we're going to touch on the elite side of things shortly, but I still just can't rule out Punk returning at this point. I really can't. With everything that's going on, and I know I've seen comments, you need to let it go, Owen. I will let it go when those in AEW let it go, because this issue is not over. It's not. Because it's still ongoing and going and going and going. Speaking of issues, let's move on to someone else who's had issues recently. That being Andrade. And Andrade's actually undergone surgery, major surgery, and is going to be out of action for quite a while. With Andrade out Elo sidelined from AEW programming since the September 4 All Out pay-per-view, there's been a lot of speculation, of course, about his future in the company. The wrestler himself fueling the rumor mill by posting a farewell message on social media earlier this month. He also had that backstage altercation with Sammy Guevara. He wants to go back to WWE. He wants to be fired by AEW. Well, in an update, Andrade revealed on Monday that he recently underwent surgery for a torn pectoral muscle. He wrote on social media, quote, "My first surgery, I can't believe it happened. A few months ago, I tore my pectoral. Thank God. I could and wanted to finish my match. I kept working because I love the business, but we know that many people do not value your effort. These days off, I took the opportunity to go to the doctor." Now, seeing as Andrade's tweet included a photo from his AEW World Trios Championship Tournament match against the Elite on August 17, one can assume that the injury actually occurred during that match. However, Andrade did wrestle in the Casino ladder match at All Out, which took place several weeks after the aforementioned Trios bout. Earlier this month, Andrade hinted that he recently underwent surgery as he posted a video of himself speaking from a hospital bed. Through the video, Andrade also announced his decision to withdraw from an RGR Lucha Libre event in California due to an undisclosed health issue. He was replaced by fellow AEW star Rey Fenix at the indie event. Andrade, of course, was originally scheduled to wrestle 10 Preston Vance of the Dark Order on the October 5 taping of AEW Rampage in a career versus mask match. However, the match was cancelled after reports surfaced of a backstage altercation between Andrade and Sammy Guevara. While AEW President Tony Khan never offered a public comment on Andrade's status, several reports suggested that the Mexican star has been suspended for inciting the fight with Guevara after strong warnings from AEW officials not to get physical or confront each other backstage after the incident blew up on social media. Andrade did it anyway. Another incident happened and he was suspended for it. And it would appear during this downtime, he's decided, I'm going to get some surgery. And now he's got this surgery on his torn pec. In terms of a recovery timeline, we really don't know. I mean, torn pecs, look at Cody Rhodes, for example. Cody Rhodes is an example. He tore it, but June? Around June time. And it was speculated he'd be back maybe by the Royal Rumble. So Andrade might be looking at, again, depends on the severity of the injury. He could be looking at 6 months. He could be looking at 3 months. It all really depends on it. Do I expect to see Andrade back in AEW? Well, I don't know at this point, honestly. He is hell-bent on not being in the company, clearly. But at the same time, AEW doesn't want to let him go back to WWE. And he's got several years left on his contract. Now, if he could work out a non-compete clause, which is, again, reportedly was the hold-up when it came to AEW and CM Punk, then certainly anything's possible. He could get a non-compete clause where he's barred from going back to WWE for the remainder of his original contract. We'll have to wait and see. But it looks like in the meantime, Andrade has really no interest in going to, again, appear once again on AEW television. Ironically enough, the angle that he was originally booked in for that match, the Mask versus Korea match, which he was going to win, by the way, he wasn't going to leave, basically happened this past Friday on Rampage, where Preston Vance turned heel, turned on the Dark Order, took off his mask, threw it at the feet of -1 on the ramp. That was all meant to happen over a month ago. That was meant to happen in the match between Andrade and Preston Vance then. Of course, as I mentioned, it didn't happen, but now it has happened. So they find ways to do storylines that they want to do, even without Andrade. But as far as a recovery, I don't suspect we'll see him on television for AEW until, earliest, probably late spring next year. That's if he ever comes back. We might have seen Andrade on AEW television for the final time. Now, let's go back to talking about the Elite and talking about CM Punk. I know. It's all we talk about here on the channel, but it's certainly still a massive news story in All Elite Wrestling. And if the Elite and CM Punk have felt inseparable as of late, it may be because Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, Matt and Nick Jackson, continue to stir the pot. After telling people to let it go, you've got to let it go. We can't talk on the matter. They can't take their own advice, seemingly. Well, it all started with a Punk pipe bomb of sorts following the AEW All Out event back in September, continued with an internal investigation. With his future still up in the air, Punk hasn't made an appearance for AEW since, but the Elite, of course, did return at Full Gear and were embraced by loud F CM Punk chants. The following week on Dynamite, they soaked themselves in more Punk ribbing that included Omega biting Pac's arm, Matt pretending to botch the buckshot lariat, Omega hitting Pac with a GTS, of course Punk's finishing move, and doing this to the live crowd there in Chicago. But they're not stopping there, however. On the latest episode of Being the Elite, they once again included the anti-Punk chants while working out how they were going to approach the match in his hometown of Chicago, Illinois. While preparing for the match, Omega said, quote, "I feel the hostility of the crowd all around me," suggesting that they may have to cheat to win. The Bucks then chimed in with, "Mentally, I'm not prepared, so we might have to cheat. And if the crowd's mean to us, I'm cheating." Naturally, the Chicago crowd reacted how one could have imagined, with F the Elite chants raining down around as they soaked it up as their match got started. Shortly thereafter, however, more F CM Punk chants bubbled to the surface, and they were more than happy to show those fans off once again. We'll have to wait and see whether or not Omega and the Young Bucks decide to poke the bear once again this week. And again, this is when I go back to something is going on. My spidey senses are tingling at this point because they have to be. They have to be. And I know you could say, oh, you're just being a mark. You're just being a mark. You're getting trolled and you're falling for the troll. But at the same time, these are executive vice presidents. So is it in the EVP's best interest to troll the audience and troll social media. I know that's what they do, but at the same time, that was something they were being criticized by CM Punk for, acting like children, and they continued to do that. And they continue to make not even subtle references. If it was subtle, you would say fair enough. But when you're doing the guy's finishing move and you're doing this and you're doing the biting thing, which hasn't even been officially confirmed, it's just been widely reported. But basically, Kenny Omega confirmed it in the ring. You can't say to the audience then, when you're being serious and then you're being EVPs in interviews with major outlets, you can't say, look, guys, stop writing about it. Stop writing about it. Stop talking about it. Stop making videos on it. Stop streaming about it, because we can't talk about it. We're barred from doing so. Coming back, we were told you can't talk about it. And we're not going to talk about it. Nobody can talk about it. So let it go. It's time to move on. But seemingly, you can't move on because you keep doing it. And it's not even just what they did last week, it's what they continue to do. They did it in the first being the Elite episode, and okay, I'll hold my hands up with that, and I go, look, it was a big part of the pay-per-view. You could have ignored it, and you could have been professional, but look, that's the gimmick, that's the character, fine. That's the show. Being the Elite, it's a tongue-in-cheek show. It's all about ribbing. Stuff isn't really taken too seriously. Fine, no problem. But then what they did on Dynamite, and what the comments were prior to Dynamite from Kenny Omega about letting it go, and then doing it again the following week, to me, that's not one letting it go. So whilst they continue to not let it go, I guess we're being told as an audience, don't let it go, don't move on. Because if they just ignored it and they just carried on with the storyline that they're doing, and they carried on with their feud against Death Triangle and their best of 7 series match and whatever, then people would move on because the matches are great. But we're already at a point where we've had 2 matches in this best of 7 series. The Death Triangle have won both of them, and it's still not what people are talking about when it comes to the Elite. We're not talking about the matches. We're not talking about the Trios Championships. We're talking about the Elite and CM Punk. And as long as they continue to keep this issue alive, and that's what they're doing, they're keeping this issue alive. The more they highlight the chants, which is basically saying to the people, oh, by the way, keep doing those chants, and make no mistake, Wednesday, there'll be those chants again, because they're telling the audience to do that by putting it in these shows, highlighting it in these shows, and when they're mocking CM Punk and doing his moves, they're keeping the issue alive. And my question is, if it was a subject you didn't want people to talk about, if it was a subject that you wanted to move on from, why would you keep this issue alive? It's too on the nose at this point, and I hate this kind of thing, right? I hate when people are constantly going, it's a work, everything's a work, everything's a work, because not everything is a work. And I don't think this was initially. I really don't. What happened at All Out, it was a total shoot. I thought CM Punk was totally professional, but it feels, I can't really put my finger on it, but something is telling me in the last 2 or 3 weeks, something feels like it's changed. It really does. There aren't the conversations about CM Punk buyout clause and all this kind of stuff anymore. They're not. They're just then. Stokely Hathaway said what he said earlier on, but again, I think people took that too literally. He's not in the company at the moment because he's on the shelf. He's injured. But technically, he's still under contract. And I really do think anything's possible. And maybe cooler heads have prevailed. Maybe it is a case of everyone stepping back going, look, I still don't like you. But let's face it, we've worked ourselves, or we've sort of shooted ourselves into a situation that if we can put egos aside for a second, we can make money. Serious money. And we can get AEW red hot, which we've all got a vested interest in doing because they're EVPs, and Punk, we don't really know his status with the company, but Tony Khan openly admitted that he put Punk in the same breath as the EVPs when he said about who he goes to for creative input. So, I don't know. That's all I'm saying. I don't know. And as far as, again, I'll let it go. And I think the internet will certainly, the internet never lets anything go, or social media never lets anything go. But I think things will move on, and we'll go on to what we're supposed to be talking about, which should be this best of 7 series. But it doesn't feel like the issue here, does it? It doesn't feel like that's the issue to be talking about. It feels like they want us. They want us to still be talking about this. They want us to be talking about CM Punk. They want us to be talking about the All Out incident. Because for whatever reason, as bad as it was, it could lead to something bigger for AEW. And for a product that's really cold right now, to have Punk come back and feud with the Elite on television, maybe with FTR as his backup, a team which has publicly called out the Young Bucks several times, And again, not a work of being, shitty in their jobs as EVPs. There's something there. I believe it at this point. I really do. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right hand corner. As I mentioned, let me know your thoughts on today's AEW news stories in the comment section below. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.